cloud computing. How did we get there? So if you don't know, in 1996, Jeff Bezos moved to Seattle and he started Amazon.com as a book website, online e-commerce site. It was very successful. It grew through the e-commerce boom of the year 2000. By 2004, it was a $7 billion e-commerce platform. It wasn't just selling books, it was selling all kinds of technologies. And it was significantly busy. There was a lot of transactions. There was a lot of traffic to the website. And a $7 billion enterprise depended on its computer platform. And they got very good at running computer platforms. Really good. And then by 2006, they'd built this kind of provisioning platform for Amazon.com. And they thought, well, other businesses could benefit from this. And they made it available. That was March 2006, and Amazon Web Services launched. And it was simple storage service and elastic compute cloud. That's 9 years ago. So after 10 years of running the website for Amazon, they built this cloud service. And now we've been running it for 9 years. So that's a lot of experience. Why is that important? There's no compression algorithm for experience. So in that 9 years, we've learned about scale and about provisioning and a different way of thinking about computing, no longer shackled with three-year depreciation and then decommission and then upgrade. If you need more CPU, you have more servers, or you scale your instance vertically. That's very, very, very different. And I'll just introduce one other concept about cloud computing as well. I'll just mention it now. Once your instances are deployed instantly, and you pay only for what you use on a per-hour basis, you no longer think in terms of servers. You think in terms of instances, virtualization. But we say cloud is more than just virtualization. So this instance that you now might deploy, you can treat it as a piece of configuration. No, it's no longer a piece of server in a particular location. It's a piece of config or a piece of code. We call it infrastructure as code. And you save that config or you save that code, and then you can deploy it, and then you can turn it off. And then you can go away, and you can come back, and then you can turn it on again. Or you can deploy it somewhere else. And we'll come more onto that, but that's one of our concepts, infrastructure as code. So a little bit more about Amazon. 9 years on, we're in, I love this screen, 11 regions. Singapore is a region local to us here. There's 28 availability zones. I'll mention what they are. So each region consists of at least 2 availability zones. An availability zone is at least one data center. Some of the availability zones here, where there's several availability zones, consist of as many as 5 data centers in a single availability zone. So the scale is very big. And in the example of Singapore, the availability zones are separate power, separate floodplains, completely independent of one another. There's no dependency across the 2 availability zones. You could think of it as a data center, but we call them availability zones. And as a customer, and of course, you can speak to True, and they can help you take advantage of the immediately 2 availability zones, and you can architect your application so it's split in 2 completely separate facilities with separate dependencies to give you high availability. So even if your data center airplane takes off and lands on the data center, you're in the other availability zone, and your business application continues to run. Now, that's quite important. So across these 11 regions, we've got a million customers now. So in November, we announced we'd hit 1 million customers, 5 continents, 190 countries. Again, why is that important? It's because the scale that this compute cloud is growing at is there's huge economies of scale to be made, and we pass on those savings. And there's lots of experience when you're running cloud services at that scale. And again, you choose to run in the AWS cloud, you're running on the same computer platform as Amazon.com. And their business is quite important to them, and they make sure it's available and secure and reliable. And you get the advantage of all of those services, not just Amazon.com. NASA use it. NASA use it for the Curiosity Mars rover. They do all the computational navigation for the Mars rover. Netflix, if you've heard of Netflix, it's the video service that's from America, but gradually been launching across the world. They run entirely on AWS. I mentioned Dropbox and Spotify earlier. They run entirely on AWS. So we'll look at more customers in a bit. But in the meantime, again, just to give you the perspective of what Amazon are doing and what AWS are doing, this is something called the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And they publish this every year. And along the axis on the bottom, you have completeness of vision, and you've got ability to execute on the y-axis. So if you score high in both, you're in the top quadrant, which is a leader. And Amazon scored up there in the top right for the last 4 or 5 years, completeness of vision and ability to execute. But the interesting thing about this Magic Quadrant, this year when Gartner wrote their report, this is public, you can look it up on Gartner, Gartner estimated, if you take, that's Amazon up there, if you take the other 14 cloud providers, or infrastructure cloud providers as the title of the Magic Quadrant goes, you take all 14 of them, if you multiply their compute capacity by 5, the aggregate of all 14 multiplied by 5, you get to the capacity of AWS. So that was by Gartner's estimation, an overwhelming leader in that space, more than 5 times the compute capacity in aggregate of the total other 14 in the Magic Quadrant. So it's very big. There's a lot of servers, there's a lot of storage, and there's a lot of experience, and a lot of customers are making great use of it. Some of the customers, you'll recognize some of the brands, people like Shell, Commonwealth Bank of Australia are moving huge amounts of storage, making huge savings. As we know, the banks have had huge technology infrastructures for a long time, and they're now finding actually they're going to concentrate on banking services, and they're going to move services into the cloud. There's NASDAQ. NASDAQ are able, they do computer simulations of a day's trading, and they're able to replay a day on a per market event basis for analysis and even fraud detection, and they run all of that in AWS. Tokyo Stock Exchange. They're also using AWS in our Tokyo region that we saw earlier. Another interesting one in this part of the world is Samsung. If any of you have a Samsung TV, and their Smart Hub is the name of their connected TV service, so you connect your TV to the internet. When it connects to the internet, it connects to AWS. They run the Smart Hub service in Amazon Web Services on the compute platform. This enabled Samsung to deploy very quickly and make a huge saving on CapEx. They didn't have to buy loads of servers. Interestingly, they didn't have to plan for what capacity, how many TVs they're going to sell, how many people are going to connect them, and how much servers they need to run the load. They just put it into the cloud, and we'll get on to why the cloud enables them to scale elastically. We'll talk about that. It's because of the instant provisioning, essentially. But it's, there's some of the use cases. In ASEAN, here we have a neighboring, in Malaysia, Astro. Singapore Post, we'll look at how Singapore Post have reinvented themselves and become very successful. You're probably wondering how Singapore Post are using Amazon Web Services, but I'll tell you, we'll have them as an example. MediaCorp, Aminvest. And of course in Thailand, we've got StampMe, the loyalty card system, SuperScore for scores, and ThailandProperty.com. So already in Thailand, lots of people are using it. So this is an opportunity for you. It's wonderful that True are running this day, and they're encouraging everyone to embrace the cloud. And they're a consulting partner of AWS. They have a direct connect into our facility. So do talk to True, and they can help you realize all the benefits that we're going to start looking at today. So the number one benefit, why businesses are moving to the cloud, it's become agility. Remember I'm talking about the infrastructure, but what's enabled companies to move much faster. This is the single biggest opportunity for enterprises to become agile like startups. Startups, it's an easy question. I don't know if any of you remember the dot-com boom the first time round in the year 2000, and all the companies raised loads of money, they had loads of cash, and the vendors descended on them and said, hey, buy our software, buy our servers, buy all our stuff. And they spent all their money, and some made it, some were successful, and in the meantime, some of the vendors did pretty well out of it. But now startups, they have their idea, they concentrate on their idea, they concentrate on what differentiates them, they deploy in the cloud on a proof of concept, perhaps 1 server or 5 servers, and as they grow, they go 5, they go to 10, they go to 100, they go to 1,000. No capex throughout the entire cycle. They didn't need to raise $2 million to buy all the servers, or raise $2 million, buy all the servers, not receive the traffic, and then have a whole load of servers that aren't doing anything. Probably plenty of people in this room have seen that. I've certainly seen it in my career. We used to call them rack warmers. just servers that the project never happened and the servers just sit there. That doesn't happen in the cloud. It certainly doesn't happen to businesses anyway. So as I said, old world, infrastructure, weeks. New world, deploy a new environment. As I talked about earlier, you have your configuration for your environment. Your environment might consist of 3 tiers, several servers, and you save something called a cloud formation template. This is a service in AWS. You want a new environment, you deploy a new one straight away. And you only start paying for it the moment you deploy it. When you're not using it, you shut it down. For example, some companies, the dev environment, they shut down on the weekend because they can save a bunch of money because no one's using it on the weekend. Deploy a new prod environment. Deploy a new environment in Japan. You can take your CloudFormation template. I'll give you the example of Netflix. They were originally in the US, and they were using Amazon Web Services in the US. And when they opened in the UK and a few of the Northern European countries, they didn't open an office in Europe. They didn't visit a data center. They didn't have any new partners. They took their CloudFormation template for their entire Netflix business, and they deployed it into our EU West region, which is in Ireland. And they were in business straight away. So you can deploy a new environment in a new region, whether it's Japan or Europe. Add 1,000 servers, and I really mean you can add 1,000 servers. It's well within the capacity to add at no notice. Remove 1,000 servers. You've got to remember, the cloud allows you to elastically scale up quickly, but don't forget you can elastically scale down just as quickly, which is just as important. And then there's, over the 9 years that we've been in business, we've started adding more than just instances and storage and sophisticated database technologies, but higher level services we call application services. For example, we have a data warehouse product called Redshift, and it's a columnar database on a petabyte scale. And you might have a petabyte of data that you want to do some data analytics on. It used to cost a fortune. You can now deploy your petabyte data warehouse. You can do your analytics, you can do your processing, have your data, your insights into your sector or your business, and then shut down your data warehouse. Everything changes with this kind of agility. That's why cloud is transforming business, and that's why it's so important. I think the biggest technology shift for all businesses. I'm not just talking about technologies. I'm talking about universities, government agencies like NASA, entertainment like Netflix. And as I mentioned, this enables businesses to innovate. It enables them to try new things. Old world, experiment infrequently, failure's expensive, no one really wants to sort of do the $200,000 capex and then the project not happen, and they're kind of like, it's not a good position to be in. But if they do that in the cloud, they can experiment often, they can fail quickly, fail fast, fail cheap, no overhead, no collateral damage. And then innovate more. You see, you'll only discover something new if you're willing to get things wrong. You never, you see the success stories. That's not normally when a company it's not normally their first app or their first idea. Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb. He invented the light bulb that transformed homes and businesses and with electric lighting mainly. But it wasn't the first version of the light bulb. He'd built like 1,000 prototypes, which had all failed. But because he was willing to keep trying and keep learning. And this is what it does to business. It enables you to fail cheap and fast without collateral damage. And that allows you to innovate. The next reason to move to the AWS cloud, or the cloud, is the broad depth of services that we offer. So as I say, in 9 years we started with storage, compute, then we offered relational database service. I'll describe them here. So there's the core infrastructure. I talked about the regions and the networking. We have networking connecting all of the regions and all of the availability zones. And actually, I didn't even mention our 52 edge locations. So there's edge locations across different parts of ASEAN and different parts of the world. We're continuing to add regions. We're continuing to add edge locations. It's all interconnected. On top of that, we started with Elastic Compute Cloud, which is instances. There's 20 or so different instances. You can run different operating systems. You can use Windows, you can use Linux, you can use Red Hat, you can use different programming environments. You can use Java, you can use .NET, you can use Python, and there's SDKs for all of these in the compute space. Different numbers of CPUs, different amounts of memory, all there. You can start with a small instance, If your service gets busy, you can just change it to a larger instance. Storage, we've got two main types of storage. We've got simple storage service, which is a object-based storage, currently holds over 1 trillion objects and peaks at over 2 million requests per second. So that's globally, collectively. So, and we have a storage solution called elastic block storage as well, mostly SSD-backed. You can choose magnetic. You can create your own volumes. So huge opportunities in storage. Databases I don't know if anyone's set up an Oracle database before, but it's fairly involved. Normally it requires a couple of switches, maybe some SAN switches, maybe some storage, a couple of servers. An Oracle license is a pretty complicated thing on its own. You can set up an Oracle, what we call a relational database service, in 10 minutes, and you pay for it on an hourly basis. That's pretty impressive. And not just Oracle, we support Microsoft SQL Server, we support MySQL, and the new Amazon database, Aurora, which is a MySQL compatible database. But yes, a high-performance version. So we call that a relational database service. You just say the database you want, and you connect to it as a service. Then what we did, we actually continued to abstract further away. You don't worry about the hardware or the networking or even the storage or the instances or the database. And then you go up into the higher-level application services. So we have things like CloudWatch. Comes with every instance. It's monitoring, metrics, alarms. We have CloudTrail. Every event that happens in your environment is monitored. Kinesis. This is a real-time analytics data processing. You just feed data in and you push it out the other side into your application. So there's over 40 services in total. And then on top of that, there's deployment and administration services. These can help you with code deploy, config management, OpsWorks, which is a version of Chef configuration management, and we offer a whole breadth. We're continuing to innovate. How many new services and how often? Well, in 2012, there was 159 new features and announcements. That's not 159 new services because there's 40 main services, but we're continuing to add things, new pieces. We iterate. There's a new feature constantly, and across all the services, nearly 160, 280 in 2013. And last year we exited with over 500 new services, announcements and features to services. So as a customer of the cloud, you benefit from all of those changes. No software upgrade, no change in price, nothing you have to do, just new services. So that gives you a breadth of services should you decide to go in the cloud. If you decided to go in the data center, whatever you bought, that's what you got. Probably 3 years, you get the next version. If you go with the cloud, you get all the services as they come along. So just for example, at reInvent in November last year, this is just some of the services that we announced. A key management service, so an ability to serve encryption keys to your file systems, to your instances. Some of those are in preview. There's code deploy, code commit, code pipeline. These are lifecycle management tools. And this was the database that I mentioned, RDS for Aurora. 10 times the performance of MySQL, 1/10 of the price of commercial databases. If you need a high-performance MySQL compatible database. Anyone use Docker in the audience? Docker is a trend. We've deployed something called EC2 Container Service. It's effectively Docker in EC2, and you just basically start deploying Docker images. So we're keeping up with the trends. You don't have to worry about upgrading your environment. All the new services come to you, and one of the latest ones is an important one, AWS Lambda. You don't even need to deploy any servers anymore. You write your code in Node.js, you deploy it to Lambda based on operations, either put files into S3, your code executes. You don't even have servers anymore. So we're continuing to iterate, and you receive all the benefits of that. So while I'm on that subject of new features and iterating, I'll mention security. Customers sometimes ask, is it secure? Is it safe to put my data in there? So on behalf of our customers, we get the accreditations they need to be compliant with whatever regulatory board that their industry operates in. So for example, we've got SOC level 1, 2, and 3. We've got the Motion Pictures Association of America, ISO 9001. HIPAA is on there somewhere, I think that's HIPAA, which is for the healthcare in the United States. And just recently in Singapore, the Singapore government released a certification for cloud providers, and AWS were Tier 3, which is a top-tier certified cloud provider in Singapore. So they're useful for your business, and it's very secure. We provide lots of tools. You have to write a secure application in the environment, but the environment is secure. The data centers are secure. People don't have access to them. And then, compliance, audit, we can help with that. And as I say, as you've seen, Commonwealth Bank of Australia and NASDAQ are moving to AWS. So there's a very safe operating environment. In fact, businesses are finding that their security posture improves as they move to the cloud. If we've passed the days where put it inside the corporate network and the firewall, and then you're safe, or in the data center and you just have your firewall. Everything outside the firewall is dangerous. Everything inside is safe. It's not like that anymore, right? We all know that, we like to connect to services on our devices, on our phone, on our tablet, when we're remote working, when we're traveling, when we're working from home. We need all of those data services outside of the corporate environment. So, the cloud is the natural place for them, but you just need cloud-level security, and you need to secure your environment in a way that enables people to work. And AWS does that. Okay. I hope you're still with me. Next, one of the reasons I've touched on is the cost saving. So cost saving is a huge reason to move to the cloud. So just to recap, we talked about the agility, the instant nature of the cloud, the breadth of services, new features, you get to benefit them all. And an obvious one is cost saving, and everyone says cost saving. Every vendor ever is going to save you money. But moving to the cloud really will save you money. It has transformed things. So, for a start, no CapEx. I'm sure a lot of people have seen some 6-7-figure CapExes in the past for buying things. But I can assure you, you can go and you can use AWS and you can set up with zero CapEx. You only pay for what you use. You pay by the hour, and the moment you stop using, you stop paying. That doesn't mean you can't run a service for a year or 2 years, but the fact of the matter is, you're trading your CapEx for a lower variable cost on an hourly basis. Most of our prices are on an hourly basis. Now, that hourly cost, that low variable cost, is also lower. Now, why is that lower? That's lower through economies of scale. So that was why I went back in the 11 regions and the trillion objects in S3. That's why they were important, because in economies of scale, we make savings, and then we pass those savings on to customers. Now, I'll just jump to this slide. We've reduced prices 47 times in the last 9 years. That's largely in the absence of any competitive reason to do so. Why are we doing that? Why does Amazon do that? It's in the DNA of Amazon. I don't know if anyone's ever used Amazon retail e-commerce website, but it's customer-focused and customer-obsessed. And it drives prices down in the retail space. And that's in the DNA of Amazon, and it's in the DNA of AWS. We believe this is going to be an extremely high-volume, low-margin business. We believe businesses everywhere are going to just use the cloud. It makes so much sense. And that means there's going to be a lot, we think this is day one. There are 11 regions now, but there's going to be much bigger. It's going to get very big. And as we continue to make them savings, we'll continue to pass the savings on. So the scale allows us to do that. Our nature, the Amazon DNA, means we pass those savings on. And we're comfortable running a high-volume, low-margin business. This is, retailer, cloud provider. It actually works very well. It's the new paradigm in computing. This is why it's the biggest transformation in our lifetime, certainly in my lifetime. I don't think I mentioned it, but I touched earlier to give you another perspective on scale. I said, when they launched in 1996, by 2004, they were a $7 billion enterprise. Well, there were some calculations made. They thought, that was really big back then. So it turns out that every day, on average, Amazon add enough compute capacity to the global AWS infrastructure, which is enough to support the Amazon retail business when it was a $7 billion business. That's how much we add every day. That's like a lot of stuff being delivered to a lot of data centers all over the world. So there's a huge economy of scale there, and you'll benefit from that. So there is a genuine reason, that you will save money. Certainly you won't pay any CapEx, and certainly your OpEx will be better. You'll never have to decommission another server. You'll never have an end of life. You'll never have to we're going to do a hardware refresh on that, a 3-year cycle depreciation. All of that stuff is all gone. a variable cost depending on how much you use. Okay, brings me on to the example that I said I was going to mention. It was Singapore Post. How does Singapore Post use AWS, and like, you know, why is it so important to them? So, Singapore Post it's the postal service in Singapore. It was privatized in 2003. People aren't really sending as many letters as they need to, so it became pretty competitive for Singapore Post. So they had a logistics center right across Asia with distribution and warehousing and parcels and all that kind of stuff. And they launched SingPost e-commerce as a business, which leveraged their distribution and postal facilities. And they partnered with AWS to do all the compute platform for e-commerce. So you can go to any Adidas site in Southeast Asia, and it's run actually by SingPost. They host it in turn on AWS, and they do the fulfillment and the shipping and all of those kind of things. Same with Toshiba. And they've got 30 customers